Marlene?
Yes, give me 1 minute, Xavier.
Copy that.
Hello.
Okay, I'm just going to see, Jeremiah, you need 5 for quorum. So let me just see who's here. Okay, you can go ahead and call the meeting to order when you're ready, Jeremiah.
Thank you, Marlene. Welcome, everybody. It's 6:40 p.m. I'm going to call the Housing Committee meeting to order now. But before we get started, I'm going to have Marlene just make some introductory comments.
Okay, thank you, Jeremiah. Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry if anyone had a delay getting onto this Zoom meeting. I apologize, and we appreciate your patience. But until further notice, all meetings of Manhattan Community Board 11 will be conducted by video conference. Links to register to attend the video conferences of each of our respective committee meetings will be published on the meetings calendar on our website. For those of you who are calling in, it is www.cb11m.org. To avoid crosstalk and help the meeting run effectively, panelists and attendees are asked to keep their microphones on mute when they are not speaking. It is also helpful to utilize headphones. Those participating by phone can dial *6 to unmute, and that is also how you mute your line. If you wish to share a question or comment, you may do so by utilizing the raised hands function. Our staff will monitor to ensure that hands are recognized in turn. Those participating by phone can dial *9 to raise their hand. Committee members will be called on first, then attendees. Please keep your questions and comments brief. Jeremiah, I'm going to turn it back over to you now.
Thank you, Marlene. All right, so with that, I will get underway here. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt by Robert.
Second.
Who just seconded? Candy?
John Green.
Okay, second, John Green. Thanks. And we still need to call the roll for that vote?
Sure, if you want me to, I can, but you can if you would like. Would you want me to?
I think I can. I mean, this one I believe I could do by voice and see. All right, all in favor to adopt the agenda? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so the agenda is adopted. All right, so let's get underway with any announcements. Do I have any announcements from any committee members? I do see that Nye has her hand raised. So Nye, go ahead.
Nye?
Oh, I just saw the unmute. Can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
Awesome. I just wanted to quickly mention that I just got word this morning from the test and trace team that they will be doing mass distributions and information distributions starting tomorrow in our district. They're going to start at Taft houses tomorrow, then go to 1775 on Thursday, Taeno on Friday. And we'll also be in other parts of our district at train stations, grocery stores, et cetera, for the next few days. I wanted to make sure just that the housing committee was aware of it and our office staff, just in case anyone gets any questions about it. But I am happy that they are coming to do these mass distributions. Last week, I know they gave out 42,000 masks in a neighboring district, and we're hoping between now and next week that a similar distribution can happen in our district now that there is a surge in our neighborhood. They are also going to host what they call Test and Trace Tuesday. So there will be a van, a mobile unit going through our neighborhood next Tuesday, primarily by our public housing areas and our corridors.
Thank you, Nye, for that announcement. All right, everyone. I see Xavier has his hand up as well. Go ahead, Xavier.
Thank you, Jeremiah. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. And thank you, Nye. Again, we're on the same page. Glad to serve with you on human services. I think that what we're seeing right now beyond the surge here, we're also seeing our stamina decrease when it comes to COVID preparedness, awareness, wearing our masks. But we're also seeing an emotional wearing away. People are exhausted. And one of the things I wanted to say to many of our board members, as well as the public at large, that if you are not feeling okay, and it is okay to not feel okay, you don't have to just chin up and bear it. NYC Well, there are all these different programs where you can reach out, and it's very important, whether you've been in the same boat like some of us on the board who have lost friends and family, or just are exhausted from both the inertia and the repetitiveness. I would almost say like Groundhog Day. If you are in that state, please reach out, let us know. We're here to serve and help, and we will try to work together to provide resources. Now, to my board members, again, reach out to us. We will be contacting you if you are feeling taxed, exhausted. We're here as a resource and also to help, because when we're at 100%, we're able to serve the community at 100%. And that includes if you have any questions about Robert's Rules of Order or general things that are before us, please let us know, because that's how we work together. It is exhausting being on Zoom. It is not the way of the world for us, whether you're civically engaged or not. So please, you have my information. I'll drop it in the chat for those members of the public attending. And we look forward to moving forward through these holiday months as productively as possible. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Xavier. Appreciate that reminder. Do I have any other announcements from committee or public? I don't see any hands, so I'll just give one quick moment. Oh, there we go. I got a hand. So Tamika, go ahead.
Mute. Hi, everybody. I'm just coming to say, if you have any young people that needs job training, my non-for-profit is open and taking applications to 17 to 30 to learn about the insurance industry, so they can come and learn about the industry and get workforce training. And we go take them through a 16-week process, and they'll get licensed at the end.
It's wonderful. Thanks a lot for sharing that. Do I have any other announcements?
I'm sorry,
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Marlene.
Tamika, may I ask you to leave that information in the chat?
I was just about to say that. That's great.
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks, Marlene. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
Okay, so do I have any other announcements? All right, any informational updates from the committee? Okay, from the public, anyone? All right, so we're gonna go get into the substance of tonight's committee meeting, and basically we're gonna be chatting about primarily about 4 different pieces of legislation that have been introduced. One is local, it's for New York City, and then 3 are on the state level. And address different aspects, but all have to deal with housing, all have to deal with addressing homelessness. The first one is a bill that's sponsored by Councilmember Levin, and it's got 18 co-sponsors in the City Council. And it's legislation that would ban landlords from, it would prohibit them from running criminal background checks on prospective tenants, or having a question on any application regarding an arrest or criminal history. The council member and the co-sponsors, among various justifications, one of the big things is that there is a currently finding stable housing, which the council member argues, and I believe is true, is the cornerstone of having a solid foundation to be able to, have security, to be able to get into the other facets of life, to be able to get yourself back on your feet when it comes to employment, providing shelter for your family. Right now there's a big pipeline. It's very difficult for people with a history of incarceration to find stable permanent housing. There are places like the Fortune Society that I know that provide temporary housing, and they may even have some permanent housing, but by and large, it's very difficult for folks. The council member talks about the prison to shelter pipeline that exists, and now we also see the shelter rates have also increased, and there's also concerns, public health concerns with COVID pandemic. So that is legislation, again, that has been introduced by the council member and is being discussed. Currently, there's no timeline for a vote on it. And I do not believe that there has been official comment yet from either the mayor or the council speaker, although the council member seems to be enthusiastic and believe that the mayor would be very enthusiastic about this bill. Now, of course, the other side of this issue, that the reason why landlord groups are fiercely opposed to this bill is because they argue that there's also an obligation to look after the safety of tenants. And so they should know folks have a criminal history. They respond. I think there's some folks who even argue in the landlord groups who say that if you want to have a conversation about discrimination, because also, of course, there's another layer to this, right? So we know historically folks, if you're barred any criminal history, it could be for minor offenses. There's folks, that have minor drug possession offenses in quantities, for example, that were for personal use, but went to prison for it, and for a crime that's not prosecuted by even a long stretch to the same degree in white communities or more affluent places. That's another problem that's perpetuating these racial inequities and imbalances. But there are those in the landlord groups who say, if you want, we can have a more nuanced conversation. We do still want to know if folks have a criminal history, because we would like to know what for. So the counter argument is that we don't want folks, for example, convicted sex offenders, some or violent offenders of any sort. Also, there's drug distribution or production. They would be concerned if a prospective tenant had that sort of history. So that's the counter argument to this bill. The council member responds and says that he doesn't, at the moment, doesn't seem inclined to such a nuanced conversation, because he cites studies from John Jay that say that the longer somebody is actually punished and serves time for a crime, that the lower the recidivism rate is. And so these are the arguments that are in place right now, both for and against. So that is right now, and it's got 19 sponsors in total. So it's a very significant chunk of the city council. So with that background on it, I just want to open it up to discussion by the committee. And I see that Candy has her hand raised, so go ahead, Candy, you have the floor.
Hi, good evening. So, I'm glad that this is being brought up. And of course, we deal with a lot of people that are coming formerly incarcerated and showing them how to navigate into the system of how housing is opposed to before they went in, and how it has changed drastically over the years. But in the fair housing law, the applications are now being changed, that they're not supposed to be asking on that application if they ever been convicted or anything like that, only because of the fact that then they're not going to have a fair shot before the interview, the initial eligibility interview. Just by looking at that application, it's going to automatically just wean them out from not having the opportunity to be a potential tenant in any building. So there has been some changes as to the way the applications on the housing applications are being done, where it doesn't have, at least to some of the housing providers, where it should not show as to why, for them to explain why they ever been convicted, and questions like that. Because of the fair housing law that has come into play, well, at least on the federal level, which is where that's where I found out that we cannot be asking any of those questions. Of those applications have to be modified now. But a lot of the housing management companies don't do that, and that's something that has to be implemented. So if the city is doing it and this legislation passes, then the only problem will be those that have restrictions, such as what do you call them? I don't want to say it in a wrong. I don't want to be saying it. So let me find the right word to is for those that have been convicted for rape, or child molesting, that they have restrictions as to if they're in a multifamily, they cannot, there's certain restrictions to that. But that then they would have to bring that up and disclose it at the initial eligibility interview, so this will help out and bring awareness to some of the management companies that are not doing those type of practices. I just wanted to point that out.
I didn't quite follow it. When you refer to fair housing laws, what are you referring to?
In the fair housing law, we've been instructed that the applications that are being for any tenant that is applying, the question about if they've ever been convicted of a crime, that criminal background, like you don't disclose why were you convicted and for what was the reason. That does not have to be disclosed at that initial application, unless, once you go for the interview, then that's where you will have to disclose if it was because of that you've been convicted for rape, or anything that had to do with children, then that's a restriction right there. But other than that, the housing laws, that's what they're explaining to us, that we cannot discriminate anyone who has been that has been convicted of a crime that has nothing to do, that it won't put everybody in jeopardy.
Okay, that's interesting, because my understanding of the legal landscape is that is not the case, that because there is that San Francisco and Detroit were the first cities to pass anti-discrimination laws in rental housing for prospective tenants on the basis of criminal history. And so my understanding is that New York City would be one of the first jurisdictions to pass that because it is federally permissible, state, as well as in the state, city, everywhere, to inquire into criminal background for prospective tenants. And that's why this legislation was significant. So, I mean, unless I'm not following you on
what I can do is that
specific housing you're talking about, or what specific legislation or things, that's what I wasn't following.
Yeah, well, it has to do with the criminal background and discriminating on the formerly incarcerated from having the opportunity to get into the housing, to get into housing. But what I can do is that I can give you, I mean, they gave it to me in a disc only because they didn't want to give us the print, because it's like a book. But I can reference you to that to that piece of law that they put in on a federal level.
I would love for you to share whatever it is that you're referring to, so that we
Sure.
can better understand.
Okay.
Anyone else? I don't see any other hands from the committee, so I'm going to open it up to the public as well. So if any attendees have hands, yeah, I see Jules, you are acknowledged. You can go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I only became aware of this legislation early today. I tried to read the bill on the city council site. I read the article in the Post, it's very brief, and I read an article in, I think it's New York City and state government law, which is a little more detailed. Whoops. Am I still here?
Yes, we have you.
Sorry, I'm a little lame on Zoom here.
No problem. You're fine.
Forgive me for not having my camera
Thank
on. Here's my concern. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to read you what I sent out to my block association, and see if I can find it here. I'm sorry, I should have had it ready. Because it's a little more, rather than me just stammer, I will, here we go. My understanding is a preliminary review indicates that the phrase occupancy agreement could not apply not just to renters, but to HDFCs and to co-op sales, and also sublets. So if you're a renter and you need to sublet your apartment because you need to leave town for 6 months, you would not be allowed to do a criminal background check on who you were subletting to, which I'm sure your landlord or your neighbors might not be excited. But here's the point. Okay, we applaud. Nobody wants to discriminate against someone who has an arrest record for smoking a joint or something small. Okay, and we can sympathize with someone who seems very rehabilitated after decades in prison for murder. That was the example given in the article was in cityandstatenewyork.com. If you're familiar with that publication, New York City could
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I saw
everybody's seen that one. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Right. All right. So everybody knows the example given of that gentleman who he's getting his master's and everything else. So we can sympathize with that guy, okay? Because he's documented, he's rehabbed, he called himself old and fat, whatever. But I am sure, and I'm in an HDFC, okay, and I'm from New York, okay, I lived here almost 60 years. Almost all the fellow shareholders and my neighbors who are HDFCs or renters, okay, and let me make this really clear so you understand where I'm going here. Potential future co-op buyers or potential future renters, okay? They do not want a ban on the criminal background check, which is going to lead to a recently paroled violent felon moving in down the hall. Okay, if you don't know who's moving in next to you, you're not going to move there. Okay, it's as simple as that. And I have a solution for anybody who wants to consider moving forward with this. Okay, I suggest that we do a trial version for a year or two. And we, how many people are in the city council? 50, 100?
It's 51, right?
51 city council members. Okay, I suggest that you make this ban on criminal background checks apply specifically to the buildings they live in. Okay, and also to the buildings where their families live in, and document this. I mean, you can and you should list the buildings and publicize them so that so that the parole officers know about it, and the Fortune Society knows about it, and guys in prison who are getting out know about it, and give it to rental companies, okay, or co-op sales real estate agents. Let everybody know that these are the buildings where no one is getting a criminal background check, and see how it goes for a year. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic here. If it's safe, if nothing happens, okay, if you come up with this, with some scale, which I couldn't find that in the bill. It's possibly because I don't understand how to read the New York City Council website very well. But if there's some scale that says, well, no one who's a convicted murderer, no one who's a convicted rapist, no one who's a convicted drug dealer of a certain amount of drugs or whatever, but small time crime, that guy we won't subject him to a background check. Whatever scale you want to do it on those 51 buildings or 100 buildings, including their family, and let those people see how they like living where they don't know who's coming into their apartment. I think I made my point. I think you all understand where I'm coming from here. If this is where you want to go, where we don't know who we're living next to, then start it out with the politicians who are proposing it. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak here.
Thanks for voicing your opinion, Jules.
Thank you.
I have a hand now from Xavier. Xavier, you go ahead.
Thank you, Jeremiah, and thank you everyone for the comments. I'd like to know what our next steps would be with this proposed legislation, the other items on the agenda when it comes to legislation. Do we plan to bring in the sponsors and to be able to have these more formal queries when it comes to addressing the particulars? I think that would be helpful. So that we see all sides of the issue. And I appreciate Jules weighing in and everyone else. I think it's important to have a diverse set of views. But having a family member who was previously incarcerated, I can see the impediments, but I think it's good. So Jeremiah, would you be able to elaborate on our next steps with this legislation and the others as well, what we plan to do?
Yes, well, what I would like to do is I certainly would love for any electeds who are, well, primarily if they're primarily involved with the bill, that would be best. But even if not, we can see, for example, if our local electeds have strong opinions on either side, and we can have further discussion with them or their representatives. So that we can make sure, because it also can help inform the debate much more, and also provide more of a forum as well, where it's just more of us connecting with the community and electeds and sort of acting as that vessel to keep that discussion going. But yeah, so that is what I think the next steps would be. Because right now, we're obviously, these are new pieces of legislation, are relatively new, and that, we're just getting the background right now, the lay of the land, and getting people's initial thoughts on it. But I would definitely like to go into it more, because I'm sure that these bills aren't passing tomorrow, that's for sure. So there's going to be advocacy on either side of this debate strongly playing out in the media and also politically.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to give, talk, comment, or have any questions regarding the specific topic area? And Jules, I do also appreciate you pointing out the breadth of the legislation. I don't think I did, and that it would apply to the vast majority, most rentals, leases, sublets, and or occupancy agreements. So yeah, that is much more expansive language. So that's also something that, can be part of the debate. There's certainly different sort of middle grounds that have been proposed, or ways that people, think that might be better or more nuanced to approach this problem. But there's also very strong, entrenched interests on both sides that don't really want to compromise on this. You want to keep it or you don't want it. And I think the council member himself really doesn't want it in any form watered down, but maybe not, maybe in his back pocket, he would be willing to accept some version. I'm not sure. But at least in the media, the way it's playing out is that does not seem to be the case. This is definitely a discussion that I'm glad is here. It's a big discussion that actually is, is quite layered. There's housing, there's safety, there's homelessness, there's stability, family stability, employment stability, all those sorts of things. And then you layer in the way that it's affected and informed and influenced the conversation in terms of racial inequity and economic imbalance. Does anybody else? Oh, I do see another hand. So let me see who. All right. Yes, Jules. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was just wondering, do you know, or does anyone know, is there something in the legislation as it stands now that I couldn't find that does have a scale saying, what level of crime will forbid what I don't know how this is done is in legal language. It's just like a triple negative. If you have a certain level of criminality, then the ban will not apply to you. Do we know, is there a scale in there at all? Or is it just like we can't do a background check on anybody?
Yeah, so from the materials that I have read from, also the city council side, and then also looking at what folks are saying in the media who are the proponents and opponents of this, my understanding is that in its current iteration, there is no scale, there is no degree, there is no specificity with respect to
personally, I'd say that's
and the reason why, I know one of the things that when there was a push on that, for example, saying, what about you, because you're a father to the council member who's the primary sponsor, would you want a sex offender living near you? And unless the interview was edited to some degree that I'm not aware of, he did, he gave an answer that didn't really address it square on, because he said, oh, well, we live next to a playground. So, any laws that are in place that still apply to sex offenders and their occupancy within a certain amount, a certain distance of schools or playgrounds or other places where children would be, are still in effect. So, and that's, so that's what I gather. What I gather is that it's not, that it is expansive in its scope in its current iteration. And that is also one thing that some of the landlord trade groups and advocacy groups have been saying that, some are taking a more moderate approach and saying we are willing to have the conversation. We acknowledge its role and the historical inequities that are involved here, racial inequities, economic inequities, but we want that nuanced conversation, right? So they'll say that if it's nonviolent possession offense, personal use, that's much different than, pedophilia or rape or some,
or murder,
some other thing, or murder, of course.
Or murder. Okay. I mean, listen, Xavier, hello, Xavier. Nice to see you. I sympathize with you. You had a family member who was incarcerated. I've had family members incarcerated, but I have been a victim of violent crime in New York. Okay. I've had family members who were victims of violent crime. I've had family members killed outside of New York in violent crime. Okay. And I think all this, we must look at the historical and racial and inequity and all this other stuff. I think what you need to look at is the inequity against people who are victims of violent crime. Okay. And also, I hate to bring up the elephant in the room, but we've already lost like 300,000 or 400,000 people moving out of New York. Okay. If anyone here thinks that this will attract people to come back to New York or to rent more or to buy more apartments by saying, oh, by the way, it's a complete crapshoot whether the guy moving into you is a recently released rapist, murderer, or just your run-of-the-mill assaults. I mean, I don't know who was the politician you said that kind of wishy-washed around the question of oh, I'm a father and I live near a playground. Who was that? Was that the sponsor? Was that
yes?
Yeah. Okay, well, listen, that doesn't answer what's coming in his house, what's coming in his apartment house. The fact that a law already prohibits a sex offender, a convicted sex offender from hanging around a playground, that doesn't answer the fact that you're going to let him live in your building where your kids live, where your neighbors' kids live, where your neighbors' kids' friends come to, well, not during COVID, but I mean, you see how this goes here? I mean, Yeah, you need to figure out a way to reintegrate these guys back into society. I see that. But you don't do it on the backs of people who don't commit crime. If you, I mean,
Or haven't been prosecuted for crime.
or haven't been prosecuted, or haven't been,
Yeah,
you're a,
because
so
there's
so
other
everybody's a
numbers.
criminal until they've been caught. I
No,
mean,
I'm just saying that it's undeniable that there has been unbalanced approach to prosecution, to arrest and approach.
you know what? Let me tell you something. If you want to continue, if you want to go on that route, you are going to bury New York. I can guarantee you. I'm a lot older than almost everyone in this call, except Mr. Green. I don't know. I think I'm older than you, Mr. Green. Okay. I've lived through the 60s. I was a committed communist and a junior weatherman. Okay. And I know that the plan is totally upend society, make it crazy, dissolve the police, then reinstate the police as a police state. Then everybody will just, ask for a giant government to take care of their lives. You will bury New York that way. If that's your goal, you should just come out and say it. Don't say we're trying to make housing for the formerly incarcerated. Okay. Say that we're using this to create a better society. That's you're not going to solve it. I'm sorry to be so blunt and so upfront, but
That's okay. That's one way to characterize it.
no,
Next we have Xavier, and
it's
then
an honest way to characterize
Yeah.
it. Okay.
Xavier has the floor. Thanks, Jules.
So thank you, Jules, and thank you. And I don't, since we're at the very early stages, and you'll have to excuse the background noise, the kiddos are getting ready for bed. So if you hear any screaming because of bath time, I apologize. Like that. So moving on, the particulars when it comes to our focus, and I would say anything less than a careful and considered approach with the early stages of any bill is prudent upon all of us. And I thank you, Jules, for weighing in. I think we need other members of the community to weigh in, and we value everyone's input. And again, we have multiple bills coming up that are addressing a multitude of issues. Obviously, we have our district, and Community District 11 has suffered from a high rate of recidivism. We have other components that harken back to the days of Robert Moses. And I think that's something for us to keep into consideration as we review these items. And I appreciate people weighing in. And I think what it would be helpful, Jeremiah, in the interest of other members who may have things to say and keeping the meeting moving, is that we get these sponsors, if possible, of these bills to show up and take questions and see if our representatives and where they stand. And I think that will do us a better service in this point of view.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I agree with that, and I appreciate that. I think that that's part of the discussion. Like I said, this is just the beginning, what we're doing here today. So now we have 9.
Yeah, and
oh, I'm sorry, Peter.
No, I just want everything to be taken into consideration, because democracy at its purest form is we are listening to everyone and then weighing everything out. And I think that's very important, no matter what side of the coin you're on, because we're on the side of Community Board 11, East Harlem, El Barrio, and doing what's best. So it's important to have the conversation at this level. So thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. Nye, go ahead.
I was just going to also make a second request, Jeremiah, for us to also, in addition to whatever elected officials, invite some of the advocacy groups that are supportive of this. For example, I know that there is a domestic violence women's group that has many women who are in situations where they may have harmed and or killed their perpetrators who are now trying to be reunited with their families and are having problems finding housing. And I know that they are part of the group that is also pushing for this. They don't want to be, kept from finding adequate housing, because then that creates an issue with them, with ACS, for being able to care with their children. Those cases, if you go back 20 years, weren't looked at the same way in terms of domestic violence legislation that we have now, and having a different lens as to how those situations are handled handled and how people are received when they're welcome back to the community. So I think in addition to our elected officials, we should also be looking to invite some of the groups that are in support to talk about how these advocacy groups, how their constituents have been impacted in their attempts to find housing, particularly returning back to communities that they're familiar with, may have family members and support systems in, and what we can do to support those people who are trying to rebuild and be productive citizens in our community.
Thanks, Nye. And I think what you just raised also highlights one of the points that's made by some of the groups who actually have opposed the bill in its current iteration, who have said that we should have a more nuanced conversation. So, just whether you have a criminal history, what for is, and what were their circumstances surrounding it. First, a lot of people would definitely change the circumstances.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Yes. So I think it's a good idea to reach out to those advocacy groups to invite them as well. So thank you for that. So do I have any more comments or questions from anyone either on the committee or on the public before we move to the next discussion point? Yeah, okay, well, I appreciate all the input today. And like I said, this is just the beginning of the conversation. So the next bill, and we're moving up to the state level now. So these are an update, one bill S8125A, sponsored by Senator Gianaris, is what's summarized here saying that it's a suspend rent and mortgage payments for 90 days for eligible residents, property owners, and small business commercial tenants facing financial hardship during the pandemic. The good news is, depending on who you ask, but one thing that I thought was positive is that when looking at the actual text of the bill that's been proposed, it would actually waive those payments, those 90 days of payments. So for any residential tenant who lost employment as a result of the restrictions due to the state of emergency, or any commercial tenant who was forced to close their business and lost income as a result because of these restrictions in place during the state of emergency, it would forgive 90 days worth of payments for those individuals, and it would be waived. They would not be held responsible, at least in the text of the bill, from what I saw there, would not be held responsible at any point for this. So it'd be complete forgiveness. That would also, in turn, there would be mortgage forgiveness for landlords of such tenants. And this would be for 90 days from the date that the bill is passed or signed into law. So are there any comments or questions on that? So, some folks would think that it doesn't go nearly far enough because there are people who, a lot of folks are saying that the real solution is to completely cancel during the state of emergency rent payments and mortgage payments for small landlords, small homeowners, excuse me. But then there's also, folks who believe that this would be some relief, which is better than no relief. And again, it could also be a bill that perhaps would be more politically palatable, and perhaps, politicians thought they could navigate it a little bit easier. But so does anyone have any comments or questions about that bill? All right, I don't see any hands. If you think of anything later, of course, we can circle back. But there's also S8667, which is introduced by Senator Myrie, and that is to extend the eviction and foreclosure moratorium, both for commercial and residential tenants, that is, until the end of the state of emergency, plus 1 year on top of that. So the bill would prevent any evictions from occurring during the state of emergency, period. It's a blanket moratorium through this piece of legislation. Another thing that's not there on the agenda, but, and I see the hand, I'll get to in just a moment, but one other thing that is not on the agenda language, but I also saw in reading the text of the bill, is that there also would be no monetary judgments permitted either for rent arrears that during the covered period, which is from March 7th, 2020 to the end of the state of emergency plus 1 year, right? So it does reach pretty far, this bill, with what it's in its attempt here, in what it's trying to do in protecting tenants and small owners and landlords. Ivy, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering if there's any relief for interest charged to small homeowners on mortgage payments. It sounds like there isn't so far, but it sounds like that's also potentially a big problem for small landlords who are working with their tenants who are unable to pay rent.
Yeah, I think that's another facet and an important fact to highlight. I don't believe either, to my knowledge, that there's been any legislation addressing that specifically. If I remember correctly, the 90-day waiver of rent payments and mortgage payments as during the pandemic or the Senate GNR's bill that we were just talking about, the last one. If I remember correctly, there might be a clause in there as well covering, late fees, different interest, different penalties. But I don't quote me on that. I'd have to look at the bill again. But again, it would still only be for 90 days. All right, so let's see, have another hand. Jules, go ahead, you have the floor.
Sorry about that. So I have a question on this moratorium on evictions. Is there any discussion of an exemption for a landlord to be able to, or a someone who's subletting to evict a criminally behaving tenant or a shareholder, or excuse me, yeah, even a shareholder or a subletter? We see these stories once a month about some freeloader who's just who's doing this, but I'm less concerned about these guys milking a $20,000 a month apartment than I am. I'm in a small HDFC, and if we had somebody who has a job and refused to pay rent, pay the maintenance, and was throwing wild parties and dealing drugs out of his apartment, but we couldn't get him busted, I'd want him evicted. And I know there's there's thousands of HDFC buildings. Most of us are low to mid income. So is there any exemption in there for evicting someone for bad acts?
All right. First, I don't think that's a good question. I don't know that I said it at the beginning during my summary of it, but this moratorium would only be for evictions based on the non-payment of rent
Forgive
during this period.
I'm sorry.
So it's not for a criminal. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I missed that. Please move on. I'm terribly sorry.
No problem at all. It was a good point. I don't know if I had made that clear. Okay, next, Marina. Go ahead, you have the floor.
Yes, hi, thank you. So I just actually wanted to respond to the last speaker to say that, it's a long road from junior weatherman to libertarian to NIMBYism. And I really feel that, we collectively as East Harlem residents need to reflect on where we came from and where we are now and how that road has taken us, and have some more human compassion to your neighbors, as opposed to, this isolated me, NIMBY attitude that a lot of folks, appear to still have in our community. So I just wanted to speak to that issue. I have other things to say about other things coming up in the dialogue, but I really feel strongly about that. And then also just I wish I had as much time to speak as this person has, because I've never had that much time to speak during a community board meeting, but hey, you know, whatever. Thank you. That's it for now.
No problem. And Marina, you have the floor. Every time your hand goes up, I'm gonna acknowledge you unless we're pressed for time. So do I have any other comments or questions regarding the specific one? There's one more bill that I wanted to touch on before we get on a brief update on the eviction moratorium in housing court. Okay, so again, we can circle back if you think of something later. Oh, up, hand went up, then down, and now there's one. Candy, go ahead.
Okay, so based on the first, I'm sorry, because it's my turn to cook, so I have to do something. So the suspend on the mortgage and the rent payments to forego. So if that's gonna be done, if it's this bill that gets proposed and it gets accepted, my thing is that there should also, I'll put the camera on, I'm sorry, that there should also be some assistance for the property owners as well, where then the city should then give some type of a like not let me put it right, where the city can then also give some type of not an incentive, but give at least some leadway for the property owners not to be paying taxes, because those property taxes is what really kills a building as well. You're talking about the water and the property taxes that they have to pay, you know, besides the mortgage. And even if they do away with the mortgage, they still may have the balloon interest that at the end of the year, they're going to have to want the banks or whoever's the lender are going to want them to pay that up quickly or immediately, you know, so that, you know, it has to be a balance where it can be a win-win for not only the homeowner that's providing shelter for individuals, right? As part of the humanity that housing is a right. But at the same time, then government should also take compassion and understand that the only way any building is going to be serviced is that if then they have to give them some type of, you know, monetary freeway, so like that they can be able to operate that building, you know, keep a super in place to maintain the quality of living for repairs and everything for the tenants. You know, something has to be done where, yeah, we want to, you know, help out everyone, but at the same time, you have to help out the one that's also providing that home for that, for those families. You know, so that should also, there should be some type of legislation that will help everybody, you know, and in this way, you know, if some old buildings got to buy oil, that's not going to be free. So they're going to pay that from where? So there has to be something that has to be put in place that it can help and benefit everybody, right. You know, because otherwise than that, I mean, there's not, you know, there's not going to be any heat. It's going to be, you know, the quality of living is not going to be there. The substandard, bad enough that there's some buildings that are already on the substandard living. And then imagine when the rent gets canceled out, how are the building is going to have, you know, the expenses has to be covered. And the city does not forgive water taxes. They're not forgivable, you know, so that has to be implemented. You know, they have to implement property tax, or at least half of it or something, but it has to be a win-win situation here. That's my comment.
Thanks, Candy. Yeah, those are also very valid points. Certainly, everything cause and effect, right? Dominoes fall, right? But yeah, but I think that I know a lot of these bills, people are trying to, give that support to finally try to give it and balance it a little bit more to those who most need it, right? But that includes small landlords and small homeowners. We are primarily a renting community, but we definitely have, that includes other folks as well that I just said. So,
well, you have the HCFCs, and if there aren't any reserves, then there's a problem. So, I'm just saying, I'm not against because I'm a renter. So if you want to cancel out rent, hey, but I'm just saying that, everything has a cause and effect. And we could all, say, yeah, cancel out the rent, but what's going to happen when that homeowner is freezing cold outside and they can't afford to buy the oil? Because you're not going to get that for free.
Right.
So something has to, we got to think
Yeah,
about both.
and I think you raise a good point. I think that that's been some of the counter arguments too, that some of the people who have been in the, in the tenants movement have had problems with some of the voucher programs that have been set up to help tenants, for example, because of how burdensome they are and hard to qualify in the application process and how the onus is on the tenant who needs this help. But then there's been arguments that, look, we always put that burden on that side of the scale. Like, we should help out, as you're saying, Candy, but maybe there should be a fund set up for them where they have to go through an application, they have to prove their hardships. Maybe there's something for them,
Right.
But that's all part of the discussion. So I think
Mhm.
that I'm glad that you brought that up. So I have Xavier.
Thank you.
You're next. Yeah, thanks, Candy.
Yeah, thank you. This is a very thoughtful discussion from everyone, our members of the public participating, and our board members. And I wanted to say thank you, because many of us in this Zoom environment are often can find it exhausting. Staring at the screen, we think it's intimate, but it feels like it is, but it isn't. It's not the same as being in the room and collaborating. One of the things I would say is that many of us who the previous session, we did pass our rent moratorium, and we addressed our small landlords as well, realizing that those rungs in the ladder are very, very important. And in fact, crucial to an upward mobility, which has now been completely hampered. And I do think there is a certain relevance when we're looking at the current need for federal stimulus as it comes to, we are at the unfortunate repetition of history where it's a drop dead New York moment, except we don't have Gerald Ford. And I think earlier was a coalition announced today from Congress and the Senate, and they said we want to pass something. But again, it takes a while for that to trickle down, and we have to take those measures and advocacy when it comes to going to the state and to the city and how we met that out, because at the end of the day, there are certain consumable costs that that will not be waived unless we have willing partners. We can take a position on that, and I hope that with these bills, we can impress upon the sponsors and their co-sponsors and the legislators within our community to take a particular position to help advocate for our constituents. So that I really want us to look at that holistically, because this is a very singular moment we're experiencing right now. And I think it's important that we weigh all of this out, and then requires us to have an in-depth conversation. But those are the two things. How do we pay for it? And in that are, if there's truly a time and need, I think it was Warner who said today, Senator Warner, and one other said, if there's truly a time to borrow, this is it. If there's truly a time to pay for it and help others, this is it. And I couldn't agree more. This is the time where we have to step up. And I think that's where we should put our heart and our advocacy, is because once we get over the hump, we can then figure out, and I'm pretty sure everyone will be in a better suited position to reaffirm ourselves financially and as a community. So, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate that, Xavier. The last things I wanted to touch on in this bill before discussing the last bill is that there would be, Senator Myrie's bill would also put a moratorium on foreclosures of owner occupied residences or rented buildings or commercial spaces. So that also would be in place. And the last thing is that if you'll notice, it does take a farther step in the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, which we've discussed multiple times in this committee and in the full board. I'd be happy to refresh anyone's memory. But right now, the Tenant Safe Harbor Act protects people who had experienced financial hardship during the pandemic from an eviction because of their failure to pay rent arrears from March 7th, 2020 onward to during the state of emergency. But there could, under that law, there still can be a money judgment against the tenant, okay, but they can't be evicted. Senator Myrie's bill would prevent the money judgment as well during this time. Okay, so then the final bill that I wanted to touch on is S7628A. Senator Kavanaugh is the primary sponsor, the chief sponsor here. It authorizes the DHCR commissioner to establish a housing access voucher program for families who are homeless or face an imminent loss of housing. My understanding when I was reading the text is it looks like it's going to allocate money to the different local agencies and it can be used to supplement. For example, New York City has a lot more housing programs than probably a lot of jurisdictions, but that money from the state could be used to supplement those programs, like the City FEPS program that assists qualifying individuals. So any comments or questions on any of this legislation before we move on to the last piece here, last discussion item? Okay. All right, so the last bit that I wanted to give you won't be too long, is just because what I said last committee meeting has changed, but I did announce at the full board meeting in November a really quick update on the eviction moratorium in New York City Housing Court. So the eviction moratorium remains the same, where Governor Cuomo's executive order protects residential and commercial tenants who experience financial hardship during the pandemic from eviction for any rent arrears, okay? Even if it came from before the pandemic, okay? Or there's a judgment in court that they already have against them. So this executive order covers all commercial and residential tenants that fit that category I just described through January 1st, 2021, right? So it'll be here in less than a month. So that's the eviction moratorium right now. That's the state of the moratorium. Of course, there's a CDC moratorium too, which I had discussed, that also is federal and prevents the eviction, but to avail yourself of those protections, you have to qualify and you have to sign a declaration form and send it to your landlord. Again, we've gone over that, so if there's any questions, I'm happy to expand a little bit, but that's the current state of the eviction moratorium. As far as New York City Housing Court, from last month to this month, it has changed. I had said essentially that nobody's being defaulted, which means that you lose your case in housing court or any court for failing to appear or failing to file an answer. No one was being defaulted, right? But even though court cases could be filed, that is no longer the case. Judges are again permitted to default tenants for failing to appear or failing to answer. All right, so there will be a lot of discretion that is still involved. There are a lot of judges that are still taking a very sympathetic view to anybody and trying to do all these attempts to adjourn or reach out to any party that fails to come, whether it's a landlord or tenant side, because they're preferring not to default people during the pandemic, right? Because there have been recent spikes, and New York City Housing Court, you know, rightly rolled back up into its shell, and everything's virtual again. Right? So all of the cases that I do are all virtual, and so even trials. So that is okay. But then the final thing, as far as what tenants have to do for New York City Housing Court, is if they get any non-payment petitions now, they have to answer it within 10 days. All right. There are instructions to be able to answer by phone or by computer. You can answer electronically, and the court does prefer that. There's in person in the worst case scenario, but there's no guarantees, and that can be dicey for obvious reasons here. But you have to answer within 10 days. For anyone who had a non-payment proceeding pending on or before November 3rd, 2020, those folks have 60 days to answer. So they have until, I believe the math comes out to January 2nd, 2021 to answer, okay? But anyone with a new case, a new non-payment, is required now to answer within 10 days, okay? But anyone who had a case pending on or before November 3rd, 2020, they have until January 2nd, 2021 to answer the petition. And for anyone who doesn't know what a petition is, that's the law, that's the paper that the landlord files to sue you in housing court, to evict you or, you know, to recover unpaid rent. All right, so that's it. Those are the discussion points. Does anyone have any comments or questions about anything that we've discussed up to this point? Okay, seeing nothing, I will move on to old business. Any old business from the committee? No, I don't believe so. Anyone from, oh, Candy, you got something?
I'm sorry, I don't want to be
Okay.
hogging up all the time today.
Not at
But
all.
the old businesses, can we just have follow up with NYCHA before, you know, because this month we have until this month, I think it is, to have our comments and weighing in, and I still haven't gone through the whole blueprint of it or the whole thing. So, but I think that if we can have the representative from NYCHA themselves so like that we can have a second round
I think that would be
the
great.
first time.
I think it's all really great. I mean, that's the biggest thing is I do want to increase the number of, representatives that get in here, whether they be elected officials, advocacy groups, the elected reps, just we want them in there. Of course, the source is the best, but we'll take anything. I do like that, and I do, and there have been some talks. I can pick them back up, but we have discussed that possibility that we do want that. Someone from Nigeria coming. There have been questions I know from some committee members regarding the blueprint, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we all have the materials, right? And that's why you, right? Candy?
Well, I wasn't at the meeting present when they came to present at that date in, I think it was October. So,
Okay.
I just wanted to see what was their take, what
Gotcha.
public, as far as CB11, because I know they have their own board meetings. And so, it's not like if you don't go into the website, you don't know when they're having their meetings.
Right.
But, what is being discussed, but at the same time, get public input.
Mhm.
I just don't, I just hope that with the new president coming in, the new administration, they put a hold on that until they can get a consensus with full community, ample time, community input. I don't think that's enough time that they're giving us,
Well, I definitely am going to
Just
try
my
to have a
opinion.
representative come at our next committee meeting if possible. Yeah, I'll reach out really soon. I know the holidays are coming up too, so I'll try to make contact right away.
Okay.
Nye, you have your hand up? It will do Nye, and then it'll be Ivy after Nye. Go ahead, Nye.
Just unmuted. It was kind of old business, but similar under the NYCHA request, was just getting an update on where we are with access to heat and hot water. We've had extremely warm weather, so people have been lucky, but I am starting to hear the usual complaints about people being without heat or without, working stoves. It is the holiday season. We know people are horribly food insecure, and we have a pandemic. And so I know that there was an ask previously, and I was hoping we could revisit for January to have them give us an update on the status, particularly of our public housing, but of all of our kind of senior centers and other homes that might be under the public housing purview.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'll try to get someone in on that too, because that is very important. I do want to say, and this could have gone on the New York City housing update, court update as well, but I appreciate you saying what you just said as far as heating season and everything coming up. The city, it is prioritizing HP cases. For those who don't know what an HP case is, it's what the name of a case that a landlord starts against their landlord. A tenant starts against their landlord in order to address conditions in the apartment, right? So like repairs or infestations, things like that. That's an HP, and it's dedicated. It's a special lawsuit that it only deals with the repairs. It doesn't deal with rent. No other issues come in. It's just about the conditions. They send HPD inspectors out there, document the conditions. If there are violations of record, the court just wants, they can have a trial on it, or you can settle and agree to correct them. The city is focused a lot on those cases. So legal services providers, truth be told, we're a bit inundated with them, but we do, that is the focus of the city right now, and the city as the primary funder of legal services, of free legal services, they have had us taking HP cases. Income requirements are waived during this time, during the pandemic. So I've had over income clients, clients that I don't traditionally represent, but the court's really emphasizing this, and they really want counsel. If you can't resolve it right away, and even if you can, they're prioritizing that. And so it's very common for tenants to be represented as long as they want one, right? They can call 311 or just tell the court. And even the court, even if the tenant doesn't do that, the court in a lot of cases, especially more egregious ones, are actually saying you need an attorney and I'll make a judicial referral.
Oh,
so
thank
I did want to highlight that.
Thanks.
Ivy.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, I was going to ask again more about the blueprint for change, just picking up on what Candy was saying. I think one of the things I was concerned about was really the tenant improvement vouchers. And I was just doing a little bit of research on what these are. And I think specifically if NYCHA is going to come back, ideally next month. I think earlier Marlene mentioned to me that they wouldn't be coming for 6 months, and that would just be for an update. But I'm wondering two things. One, is there like a formal mechanism whereby we can issue recommendations or some kind of, recommendations or criticisms or otherwise? And then two, can they give us a more thorough and in-depth sort of almost like a financial overview or more history and process from a legal standpoint on what the tenant improvement vouchers come from and what do they depend on? I mean, it's an HUD thing. That's what I gathered, and I haven't gathered much, but I've just been trying to find out. And then I ask, like in a Biden administration, maybe that's a good thing, but if in a Trump administration, maybe it's not. And so is it wise to tie like the fate of NYCHA and its funding to something that, I don't know, may or may not be precarious? I don't really know. I'm just asking the question. And I think that we need more information from NYCHA on exactly what these vouchers are and where they're coming from legally.
Thanks, Ivy. I will make sure to highlight that fact I took a note. So when we invite the representative, we can answer that question. And anyone can also feel free to email me if you think of something and you're saying that you want something specific addressed or something that's specifically triggered. And I will be happy to pass that along to the representative to better prepare them for our committee meeting. Stephanie, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Loud and
Can
clear.
you hear me?
Yep, got you.
Oh, okay, all right. I wasn't sure because I had to switch from my iPad to the computer. So in regards to getting information as to which buildings may or may not have heat, there's an active, there's a website right on the NYCHA website. There's a link there that'll show you all the buildings that have no heat, no gas, or water outages. I'm glad to share that with you guys. I'll share it in the chat room. And I think that was it. There was something else, but I'm kind of flustered today because I'm doing this from the computer. So I'm sorry, guys.
No, that's perfect. I appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead and share that. That's very useful. So are there any other comments, any other old business or comments on the blueprint for change? Okay, so seeing none, again, I will, Xavier, go ahead.
Real quick, I just seen one of our attendees, Marissa Bryant, who works in NYCHA and lives in NYCHA, works for NYCHA and lives in NYCHA. If you could share your information in the chat real quick, we'll reach out to you. We have, for the past several years, been doing our level best to reach out to all the TA associations and the managing agents, and we want to make sure we're reaching everyone. So please, so we can put your email and contact information so we can add you to our mailing list for disseminating information. That'll be really helpful. So I just wanted to ask everyone, and please spread the word. During COVID, it's extremely difficult, and many of us try to get around and about, and it's hard to, thank you very much. I'm seeing that right now. Marlene, if we could just copy and paste that, that would be fantastic. And we'll just add, so we can all be connected that way and we can get information shared, because it's very, very important, especially now more than ever. That was it, Jeremiah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other old business? Okay, so new business. Anyone in the committee have it? I'll give you 1 second because I do see a hand. Okay, so Marina, go ahead.
Hi again. Yes, I'm wondering, again, forgive me because this may be land use. I'm not sure which committee, but I have questions about a few things, which I always do. So is there any update or information about the East Harlem Community Land Trust, the recent transfer of properties from the city to that land trust? and how those units are going to be assured for meeting the needs of East Harlem residents, because from what I hear in the news article that I read, the lowest they're planning to go is 35% AMI and only 4 units out of, I'm not sure, I think it's 36 units set aside for homeless folks. So that's one question. Rezoning, who is monitoring and at Community Board 11, who is monitoring the promises made by developers who have been given city-owned land to build in East Harlem? Who's monitoring the promises they made to meet thresholds for East Harlem residents and thresholds for certain AMIs, that sort of thing? Is that the housing committee, or is that land use committee? And also, just to say on a personal note, I've been trying to reach the Housing Ambassador program in East Harlem throughout this whole COVID situation. I've also had a personal housing situation, which has been complicated through COVID. And I feel like nobody's answering phones and emails. And so how's that working in East Harlem? So those are 3 different things. Thank you.
Thanks, Marina. So the first one, to the first thing you said, there is a lot of overlap between, so I'm gonna try to answer as best I can, and then I'll also go to the hands and also defer to anyone who might know a little more. But as far as to the first issue you raised, again, there's a lot of overlap and sometimes collaboration between the land use and housing committees, but I do believe that I don't know if we've been officially tracking, like how we've been officially tracking those promises. I do think that would be more the purview of the land use committee, although we would definitely opine from a housing perspective, because sometimes there's bigger asks or bigger promises beyond just the housing makeup, which obviously does deal with our committee, but then it's just, you know, an aspect. And then, but what you said is also really crucial, because it's all about, you know, you can make promises, but who's tracking them? So again, I'll open it up to any committee members who might have a little bit more, but I know that discussion, those ideas have been discussed pretty
well,
avidly.
Jeremiah.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, so the first question was actually about the East Harlem Land Trust that was recently granted land from the city involving, in East Harlem, at least 3 properties and 1 in West Harlem, where according to the news articles, the lowest rents that are going to be made available once rehab for these units, because they're a mess, is going to be 35% AMI, and only 4 units out of a total of, I believe, 36 going to be set aside for homeless or formerly homeless. So I'm just wondering, is that your committee that would follow up on this? Because I do see it as problematic.
Yeah, that's definitely a housing issue. Yeah, and that we can focus on.
Yeah.
And I frankly, I was not aware of this. So this is something that I'm glad you raised.
And I say this as a former member of the Land Trust Board, just so you know.
Okay.
I'm deeply concerned about the outcome of, you know, what had been promised to be a really amazing and different model for affordable housing. And it seems not to be coming out to be that. So that's my, you know, it's like, where can we go for that information, for that advocacy from the community board level? Again, and the Housing Ambassador program is just in terms of people applying for housing, right? So the lottery system, Housing Connect, et cetera, it's been running through COVID, but that doesn't mean that the marketing agencies, the Housing Ambassador programs have been open and answering phone calls and emails and available to people who are looking for decent housing in East Harlem. So I'm asking the Housing Committee what's going on with that as well.
Okay, so I do see that several hands, some of the comments sparked some people who I think want to opine on this. So I'm going to go to Stephanie first. Stephanie, go ahead.
So I can't speak to the East Harlem Community Land Trust, unfortunately, but in regards to the HPD Housing Ambassador programs, which ones are you reaching out to? Because I think
East Harlem. And that's Candy's agency, I believe.
Well, Candy's not the only agency in East Harlem that does it. There's a few agencies in East Harlem that do it. But if it is 116 Block Association, I mean, that is Candy. We can ask Candy, you know, maybe there's a different way to reach out. Maybe maybe the information on the website is incorrect. But like I was gonna say, depending on which ones you're reaching out to, we can definitely, you know, reach out to them and say what's going on.
And well, let me just reiterate, the reason why I reached out to Candy's agency is because of the frustration of dealing with housing developers who are processing these applications in the midst of a COVID crisis, right? So they're not responsive, as well as the agencies that we're supposed to turn to advocate on our behalf, right? So there was like, well, you know, I don't want to get into my whole personal thing, but there's been this, you know, freeze of everything during COVID, and we need to take into account that people are still looking for affordable housing, still looking to move in, to apply for, and all of that. And everything seems to be frozen because I don't know, like, are you guys open? Are you not? You're not answering phone calls. You're not answering emails. Like, what's going on? And where can we get help?
Can I respond?
Well, first Xavier, and then we'll go to you, Candy. Go ahead, Xavier.
I will defer to Candy, and then I'll summarize information on one issue.
Candy?
Okay, so while we had the shut-in, nothing was being done at all. Right? Now, HPD, of course, as housing ambassadors, not only myself, but our neighboring non-for-profits as well, we were given different information because at the time, no one really knew what exactly was going to happen, because my questions was always I was first calling HPD, and of course, because of the shut-in, no one was at the offices, and still to this day, it's not happening.
Right.
The way we're communicating, and I'm just going to explain so like that, then everybody will know. The way we're communicating is by email. Is by emails. If we have any questions, we're still functioning. Now, I don't know where you're calling, but if you call me or you send me an email, because okay, well, I didn't get your email, but we can talk on a different set aside. You have my cell phone number, call my cell phone, okay? The way HPD is doing, they're still doing interviews. It's very different now. If you're gonna appeal, it's 5 days, not 10 days. You know, a lot of things have changed. And all of that we found out through a training that they gave us to all housing ambassadors. And I'm not sure if you're gonna see it on the website of HPDs, because, you know, you also know that they launched the new Housing Connect 2, you know, and there are a lot of people.
Yes.
Excuse me?
It's a mess, yes.
Yes, we know. And so we've also contacted, you know, we work through remotely with them through emails, and we do receive response. Now, response may not be as quick as you may want to be, only because we have to wait till our own, you know, anyone who we're actually contacting at HPD, we have to wait for them to respond to us, and then that's how we respond back to our clients, you know, and sometimes we don't get the response the same day. Sometimes we get it 2 or 3 days later, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to be responsive. We're still working. And we also do in-person by appointments is how we see the people. We don't see them like we used to before because, of course, because we're in COVID. And so this is how we're still helping others that need to be navigated or need extra additional help. But we're taking precaution, and it has to be by appointment, and we don't mind helping anybody. And I'm sure my colleagues, as well as other not-for-profits, are doing the same thing too. We have to be precautious, like the way it's not like before. You know, everybody could have done a walk-in. It can't be like that anymore. And we're operating on different days, not like on an everyday basis either. So whatever anybody needs help with, so far we've been helping people since even during the time we had the shut-in, that we were able to communicate. But it was pretty hard for the past 4 months, you know, and then things started moving along with the communication with HPD because everybody's working from home. So, you know, it's not like you're going to get anybody in the office immediately like before. And they are
Can we-
accepting
Oh,
people because
Right.
the Carolina is taking people in right now. Yes, they
If I
are.
may, really quickly, Candy, there was a question from the public as to what a housing ambassador is. Can you just briefly tell
Sure.
us?
For HPD, because our organization does, we're neighborhood preservation with the state, but we're also, Housing Connect is, housing ambassadors help in partnership with HPD to help and navigate through the Housing Connect um, um, housing applications online. Some people, what we do is, everybody does theirs differently, but what we do is Housing Connect is applying for housing online. So you go to the website of HPD, because I see Jules is asking what is Housing Connect. So you go into the website of HPD and you do a profile where then you put in based on your income is where now the new version lets you know which buildings, which developments you're eligible for. But if you want to continue and apply for any building, then you can do so at your discretion. But there is where they'll let you know what you can qualify for as far as based on your income and your family household. And so what we do is that we help navigate the families or individuals how to apply online. And I could only speak for what we do. I can't speak for the other housing ambassadors. Okay, but we definitely work with HPD as far as doing housing in applications online and assisting and navigating and educating the people how to be ready to rent once you apply. What's the next move you have to do? Now you got to get yourself ready and be eligible, make yourself, apartment ready, let's just say, right? So that means getting all your documents in place, making sure that everything you need to make yourself eligible and qualify for the apartment once you apply and you're ready for that interview, the first initial eligibility, because now they changed it to eligibility, which doesn't guarantee you the apartment until that initial interview. So, I could do a whole presentation on this because I know it's going to take a lot and I don't want to take up that whole time. But I'm just saying, anybody that needs help, okay, if I can't help you or organization can help you, I will find somebody to help you.
Okay, so
I don't give any false information or any false hope to anyone, but I can walk you through it. And if you need to sit by us, well, not sit by us now because we have plexiglass, but we can show you even remotely on a computer, because it's all about the computer, how to actually navigate you through it step by step.
Right.
And then getting you prepared and ready for that initial interview. We help you do that as well, prepare you. So when you get there, there is no room for anything missing to stop your initial process. Because if you stop the process for one piece of document, they're going to move on to the next person, even though they're going to put you on hold. But understand that now the timing has changed. It's no longer 10 days. Okay. And you have to check your emails because that's how they're going to contact you, through emails. So check your junk, your trash, whatever it is, how you get mail, you have to check that because you only have 5 days to respond.
Okay, so Candy, I really appreciate all the work that you do. This is not about you. This is not about your agency. What I'm trying to bring attention to is the fact that during the COVID quote freeze, a lot of other entities kept moving forward full speed ahead, right? So HPD wasn't available. The Housing Ambassador Program was at a standstill because you guys were figuring out where you and how you're going to communicate with people. So maybe you weren't available, that sort of thing. But these deadlines that the developers were imposing on folks who had applied were going full steam ahead. And we had no support from either the city or locally, as far as I could see. I had to reach out to everyone in the world to apply, to get support for my personal application. And I apologize if this is like personal, but I feel like it's reflective of a lot of things going on throughout the city, not just East Harlem, is that certain city agencies are going full steam ahead. No, certain city agencies are like dropping everything and not really communicating well enough. And then programs that they fund are also impacted, obviously, by COVID. but developers are going full steam ahead. And so we're kind of left in, I didn't know there's now 5 days versus 10 days, but I appreciate you telling me that. And I'm just bringing this to bring light to this issue, not just for me, because I'm sure that a lot of other people who are looking for decent affordable housing in El Barrio are going through this situation. I just want to bring attention to this. Thank
No,
you.
you're absolutely right. And this is my challenge, and this is what I said to the HPD is how are, even though it's our, as ambassadors, we're like the liaison for them. But the challenging part is for those that don't have access to the computer. And by the way, the internet is a big integral part, because those that don't have internet, or their bill got shut, because the cable company is shutting people down anyway if you don't pay the bill. So then if you don't have access to the internet, which is something that is needed so much right now, you're really left in the dark, and no information is not given at all. A lot of things we found out through the housing marketing when we got the training and update and information. But now it's not like before that we would post it on the window or put flyers out and then disseminate it for the people. It's kind of like, when all these things are being new and being sent out, changes are being done. That's the challenging part. How do we get to actually bring it out, awareness to those that don't have access to the computer, and don't know how to navigate or have those type of resources, so, I mean, we got to go back to mailing, and the mailing list is like, it's still not, to me, I just feel like we still need to do more, and we need to do better, because this whole COVID really took us off. Like, I mean, your same questions, I kept writing to them all the time. What are we doing about the developments? Are you doing any interviews? All these kind of things we were asking about, because of course we need to respond back to clients and anybody that calls inquiring, because people were calling about evictions and also, apartment hunting. So all of that, was questions we were waiting for a long time.
Yep, I appreciate it. And I just want to say I am getting help on a personal level, but I want to bring attention to this.
No, I'm glad.
There's a lot of other people applying for housing in the middle of all these crises that we're facing. So that's all. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Marita and Candy. Thank you both very much. So I'll go to, if you still want, Xavier, and then Beverly, I see you. You'll be next after Xavier.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Candy, for very informative. People need to understand how complex the situation is right now. And thank you, Marina, for raising it. We have an issue that typically in the best of times was hard to navigate, and now is even worse. There are no two ways about it. And Jeremiah and I personally tried to help people navigating the application process. If you recall, Jeremiah, where people have been pushed back because of one small item that was not reported accurately when it comes to the application process. Now, when it comes to our land use and our housing and affordable housing with the Community Land Trust, any of those type of provisions that would become an issue at the board or come before the board would typically go through land use first before it then gets handed off like a baton and a relay to housing. So we may be in the midst of that right now. It could have been presented, and I'd have to review the minutes in all honesty to see what was presented. But with those issues, we are aware, and this is why we have asked for a more accurate accounting for AMI, because we have been in a bubble here in Northern Manhattan and in East Harlem when it comes to our local AMI, and we know we are pushed in the upward trajectory due to Westchester County. We totally agree with your point of view on that. So we'll circle back, and please reach out. We can reach out to our land use, and we'll check in with those committees to see what information we can get. Because it is important. We need affordable housing. We also need to, again, this is back to our theme, putting rungs back into the ladder. That's really what this is about. So thank you for raising it. Thank you everyone for the conversation. I'll start chasing things down this week. Thanks, Jeremiah.
I appreciate that, Xavier. Beverly? Beverly, you can go ahead if you're, it looks like you're still on mute, so I don't know if you're there still, but I'll give
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, good evening to everybody, Community 11 and everyone else. It's good to see you guys. It's been a long time since I've been able to make any of the meetings. I'm glad that we're using this venue to talk, and I'm finally able to talk to you guys, and it's good to see you guys. My question is regarding the East Harlem Land Trust, and I want to know if anyone on the panel has the addresses for the buildings that the city did give them that's in East Harlem and Central Harlem. And I'll relinquish the mic and listen.
Thanks, Beverly. Always good to have you.
Thanks.
I don't have that information. Anyone in the committee, you can go ahead, or Marina, if you know that information. Go ahead, Marina.
Hi, yes. There are 3 properties in East Harlem, one on 121st, I believe, 3rd Avenue. It's a former church. It's like a 3 or 4 story building. There's one on 126th Street, which is occupied. And the one on 110th Street at Tito Puente Way near Madison Avenue is totally vacant. So these are units that people basically died out of waiting for the city under the, I believe it was the TIL program, to renovate or rehouse them, and which never happened. So basically the properties in East Harlem are mostly vacant and or occupied by people who are in their 70s and 80s. So there is, yes, opportunity for people to move in once the renovations are done, which is like in a year or 2. You can go to ebclt.nyc, the website, for more information. I will also put an article in the chat with a link to the recent article that came out. So you can contact the land trust directly. So I can't speak for them to, to talk about the process, but it's still years away because the buildings need to be renovated. And the folks who live in the one remaining building that's occupied are, again, all seniors. And my concern is that, these folks are likely not gonna be around to see the renovations. And my concern again is so what was stated in the article is 35% AMI is the lowest threshold that they're going by, and 4 units set aside for homeless families out of 36 units doesn't speak to me to be, all that radical, right? Because CLTs, that's a whole other, the city, in my opinion, has forced their models onto these CLTs, these new CLTs that we're seeing all over this, coming out through the rezoning fights and all of that, where tenants are no longer going to be owners. They're no longer going to have, control over their units, let alone the whole building. They're welcome to join the board of the building or the board of the land trust, but the buildings are going to be renovated and managed by your traditional nonprofit organizations. And in this case, for the East Harlem Land Trust, the organizations that are going to be responsible for renovating and managing these buildings for the next, the management of the buildings is for at least a year. That's going to be Banana Kelly, which is South Bronx based. So, my question is, the longer term question is, what kind of empowerment is this for local residents when we're just moving into another nonprofit housing management model? The city was just so opposed to allowing, the real philosophy behind community land trusts, which is tenant ownership, tenant management, etc. So I want to push those issues as well as just the affordability issues. But I will put in the chat a link to the article and a link to the website. You can refer your questions directly to the land trust, which I am not affiliated with anymore.
Thank you, Maddie.
May I follow up with that? I really appreciate the information that you gave. And I understand when you're speaking that these buildings are the remains of waiting for the TIL program to be honored the way it was first structured. My building that I live in now, we've been in the program for over 20 years and still fighting with them under the TIL program to not go into the ANCP program and or the have it turn into a multifamily program. I see that they give all these everybody else the opportunity to buy the building for $1. They want to charge us $250 per apartment, then $2,500 under the ANCP program, but still taking away our rights to be self-management of the building as what the TIL program stands for. And it's really hard for the TIL buildings, not just here, but throughout the city, who HPD is just really waiting for the tenants to get old and pass on. They still holding the apartments that's vacant and not letting the tenant association rent vacant apartments, good apartments, and really, cosmetic shape that need, that need to be fixed to have people move in them. So we're still fighting this fight. The TIL buildings are still fighting this fight in order to get the same opportunities they give into these nonprofits, like the banana company that you just spoke of, and other things regarding the ANCP program, giving all this money and loans and discounts and everything, but not to the tenants. And like I said, my building, if you go through right now, the TIL buildings that's still pressing and still holding on to their buildings, managing these buildings, going to classes, we manage it, we know these buildings in and out, and not given this opportunity. So when you started talking about the East Harlem El Barrio Community Land Trust and how new they are and how fast they got this, I'm like, well, what about us? Are we just chopped liver? This doesn't make any sense. It's not fair. And still, like I said, right now we have in my building about 6 or 7 vacant apartments. I know one building has 30 units, 5 of them are occupied. The HPD will not allow these people, these tenant associations, to rent apartments in order to be self-sufficient, which is what the basics of CLT should be and the TIL program. So any help, I don't need, I'm at my end's wit as to what to do, but I'm still fighting the fight against HPD in order to get these buildings and be tenant occupied and tenant managed, self-sufficient. I mean, we've been doing it for 20 years. We know this building in and out. We're doing everything.
So Beverly, thank you. And I want you to encourage you to reach out to me so we can get together and talk. So my question is then to the committee, is this something that the committee would be willing to address, look into, or is this something we should take to land use?
No, there's something we certainly would absolutely be happy to look into. We could address it through various ways, including getting people, again, representatives in here to answer specific questions that we have regarding the TIL program, regarding the East Harlem El Barrio Community Land Trust, because certainly it's completely unacceptable to have a sleight of hand, because it does undermine the intent, the purpose behind these programs that have been established. So that is absolutely something that the committee would be interested in.
Thank you.
I don't have your email or your name, whoever is speaking with. Can I get your contact information?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in the chat. It's M. Ortiz at ehp.nyc, East Harlem Preservation. I'm gonna put it in the chat. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so very much.
Thank you both.
And we'll talk offline. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you both, Candy.
Thank you,
Marina. Appreciate that. And all right. And so Candy, and then Stephanie, and then I'll give an opportunity for one more hand so that we can wrap up soon. So Candy and then Stephanie. Go ahead, Candy.
No, I was just gonna say that the TIL program, because our organization as well, the Black Association, was a subcontractor where you have to do the TIL program and then help the residents to be converted into the HDFCs, winning them into that and putting money into the reserves so that the tenants could be able to purchase the building from the city, so then they can then start rehabilitating and regarding rehabbing the whole buildings. But yeah, once Bloomberg stepped in, things had changed drastically. And so when they wean out the subcontractors, where we were actually training the tenants how to, stay on top of their building, so they're not thinking like renters, but think like homeowners, things have changed drastically. Meetings weren't really being done, weren't being conducted, and I don't know if Beverly was still doing that, but it's like, to me, it seemed like it started to become a program to then the tenants to fail, because some of them that turned into HDFCs, they were being recaptured and being taken back because they weren't paying their municipal bills. So when you're not paying the taxes on the property, you're not paying the taxes on the water bill, all that becomes, then all of a sudden your apartment, your building then starts to be up for sale. I agree with what Beverly is saying, and there's a lot of stuff that is going on, but I think that we have to take a stand and help the existing tenants that are still under the TIL, not the ANC program, okay? Because honestly, you're not giving these residents that endured a lot of hardship and quality of living for someone else to come and take it and pull the rug right under them.
Exactly.
And I think that they really need to have a lot of help. And once that was changed, that it became exclusively just for UHAB with no subcontractors, because it was the Black Association and Goals and all these other buildings, and every night there was meetings being conducted, making sure that the governance are being done correctly, so the tenants would understand how to take over and become homeowners. Then all of a sudden things started changing to an NAC program, other individuals managing their buildings. You're taking away from them something that you have to understand how they actually lived or still living and what conditions, so they can be getting to that, to get to the eyes on that prize, and then it gets taken away from them or nothing is being done for them. And we need to advocate a little bit more to make sure that HPD does follow through and help them out. I mean, until the COVID, we were helping a whole building on the west side that is still in that program. And thank goodness that we were able to get HPD to come have meetings with them on a regular, and so that they can get back on track, so that they can get into that HDFC, because it's been too long. So I think it's something that, I know I don't want to give everybody a lot of homework or anything, but this is very important, because it's home ownership we're talking about that is on the affordability level of $250. You're not going to buy an apartment at no $250 these days. And these individuals and these tenants have been waiting on the sideline to get all this help. But at the same time, if they're not getting that support, they're not, it's just like, it's not fair. It's just not fair that someone else is going to take over, some other organization is going to take over, when we can actually show someone how they can become self-sufficient and become the homeowners that they want to be.
Thank you.
And that's my opinion. That's what I want to put out there, because I've been complaining about that for a long time. And this has been done under Bloomberg's administration.
I appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Stephanie?
Hey, so Beverly, I'm more than happy to give you my phone number directly, or I don't know if Marlene from CB11 would be happy to let you contact her and then connect with me. But I do know that it's last year specifically, HPD was organizing a lot of these buildings that were tilt buildings that did have bills that they needed to pay, the water bills, like Candy explained, or the tax bills, because if those bills aren't getting paid, then to HPD, it looks to them that you cannot manage your building, which then will not allow you to get into the HDFC program. And that might be where you're at, and that's why they're not allowing you guys to rent out the apartments that are there. But like you said, if you don't let me rent out these apartments, I'm not going to get enough finances to continue to pay for these things. So I would love to, like, I'm sure Marina has better contacts, but I would love to, you know, assist you in maybe reaching out to the elected officials, because as I said, I do know that at least last year, there were some buildings within Community Board 11 that they were going out to the community, to the city councils and speaking to them, see if they could be the intermediate to reach out to these buildings and see if we can make sure that these buildings continue to stay affordable and continue to become home ownership as we stated. But again, I'm more than happy to give you my number. Like I said, I'm sure Marina has better contacts, but I would love if our committee could be a part of that, because you're right. We should be, like Candy said, we should be fighting to making sure that these things are continued in our community.
Yes, I would definitely love to have your telephone number and talk to anyone at Community Board 11 to join together to get this done. In regards to you stating regarding taxes, under the TIL program right now, since we're not the owners of the property, we don't pay any taxes. Anybody that's in the TIL program would not have to pay any property taxes or water taxes. And regarding,
HDFCs.
right, it only would become a HDFC. There's a lot of things I would love to sit down with you guys and talk and brainstorm with you, because like I said, it's not just in East Harlem, it's throughout the city. At the beginning, maybe about in 2012, right after the housing crisis, there was at least 168 buildings that were in the TIL program, and they've been just like dwindling away, either because people died off, or they didn't have the money and just gave up, or they've been pushed into the ANCP program. Like I said, our building has been in for more than 20 years. We have had many meetings. I even spoke to the board about this some time ago, but it hasn't been, we even went to the city council. In fact, in 2017, the city sat with us and Jamani Williams at one of the meetings and said they was gonna do this and they're gonna do that, but we want ownership. I mean, we worked the buildings. We're not paying taxes now, but then again, y'all give these nonprofit organizations and developers tax credit breaks left and right. Why are you not applying that to people, up to tenants, to lower income people, in order to be self-sufficient? Because if you give us that boost at this crucial time of us beginning, we can grow to something else. We can make more houses affordable to everyone else. But we're not given the same opportunities that they're given nonprofit organizations or to developers in taxes and loans and interest rates on the loans. None of that. So I would love to, sit down and speak with you, or, by Skype or whatever, just to have a meeting to, our tenants have been waiting a very long time, and a lot of us are dying off. And then to top it off, they don't always, the family members that's living in the property, in the apartment, successorship is not even guaranteed all the time. That's another issue, and there's other options for the TA to say, we want this tenant, and HBD will deny it. So they seem to have a hidden agenda. Well, it's not hidden, to give these buildings to nonprofit or other developers. And they're waiting for these tenants for us to die off, or be more, even few in numbers, in order for them to take over the buildings. And it's not fair.
Thank you, Beverly.
Thank you.
One question.
I'm gonna wrap up the conversation.
Can I just say one thing? I'm sorry.
It was that, Candy.
Are you working with UHAB? Because UHAB is the main person that Bloomberg gave them exclusivity to help out in the TIL program and the HDFC homeowners to make sure that they're still in compliance with everything that they need to do to keep their home ownership, and the TIL program to make sure that they can get them to be converted into the HDFC. And I'm telling you this because we were their subcontractors. And I'm just saying successfully, they've been, we've helped out because the building that's still standing as an HDFC still is where the city council member Diana Ayala's building is at. Okay, that was a TIL program and was converted into an HDFC. You know, so what I'm trying to say is try and reach out also to UHAB because they have the exclusivity to be helping out with the tenants to make sure that you get to your goal as the HDFC. They have to be held accountable.
UHAB, but
Yes.
they're not the contractors anymore. It's NHS, Neighborhood Housing Services, has taken over for UHAB. UHAB is like, no, yeah. And so right now, UHAB is more like a developer, a nonprofit developer.
I know.
Yeah, they don't even have the contract with the city no more. It's now NHS, a Neighborhood Housing Service.
Thank you, Beverly. So
Thanks a lot,
just
guys.
the last thing I want to say is, well, first, Beverly, you see that you've got definitely willing committee members. So I
Thank
hope
you.
you've seen the information that has been posted into the chat. Feel free to say if you didn't, but there's numbers in the chat. I know Marlene shared the community board's number, and Stephanie as well shared hers. So well, I appreciate that because these are a lot of things that are really great to draw attention to, because on the surface, it looks like we have these wonderful programs that are still in place, but it's very important to see how they're being applied and the process that's being undertaken, and whether there's, you know, still considered there's backing and investment in that and belief in that program still, right? And what they're doing reflects how they view the program. So I appreciate that, Beverly, Marina, all of the input on this issue. So that wraps up new business. So at this point, I would entertain a, well, first I want to thank again, also just everybody in the committee and also in the public. So I really appreciate getting, as Xavier had indicated earlier, to a diverse set of points of view. A robust conversation is really crucial. And so, you know, I really do appreciate everybody who came tonight, who participated tonight, and all the thoughtfulness. So does anyone have any last burning comments? All right. Thank you very much to everybody. Any motion for adjournment? Motion, Stephanie, second. Who is that? Candy?
John.
John, okay, step first. Motion, Stephanie, second, John. And I'll do it just by acclamation. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. That wraps it up then at 8:36 p.m. Thank you all. Good night.
Good night. Marlene, I'm sorry I was late.
It's
Good night.
okay. I got you down. It's okay.
Good night, y'all.
Okay, bye.